welcome to Podcast Hosting 201, How to Book and Interview Guests Like a Pro. I got an amazing group of panelists here. I got a lot of imposter syndrome standing up here. This is just a panel of juggernauts that I'm going to introduce here in a second. But just quick show of hands, really interested to see what the audience looks like right now. Who is a podcaster and or is going to be launching a podcast very soon? And you can define very soon. Cool. Keep those hands raised. How many of you have at least 10 episodes published? Nice. 25? All right. How about 50 episodes published? We still got a couple of hands up. All right. 100 episodes. How many people have 100 episodes published? Whoa. All right, man, I don't know what you guys are doing sitting down there and not up here, but...
Take my spot.
Yeah, for real. Well, I'm really excited about this. This is an intermediate level session, so we're going to jump through the basics. We're not going to talk too much about this, but for anyone that hasn't launched a podcast yet or recently launched a podcast, I think there's going to be a ton of nuggets that you're going to get from this panel regardless. So the goal for this session is to inspire and equip you to be able to book and interview guests like a pro so that these expert interviews can help you grow your show. I got a couple of amazing panelists. Their bios are like 5 or 6 pages long. I can't really do any justice in a couple of sentences here, but if you want to learn more about them, hit the QR code up here on the slide. That will be up the whole session. But starting from the far end here, Chuck Jaffe, he is the host of the Money Life show and financial columnist at The Market Watch. Also, like, OG podcaster. He's been around for, 11 plus years, I believe. Yeah.
When you get to 3,000 episodes.
Yeah, he had plenty of hands raised. And also, he's one of the crazies that have a daily show which incorporates a guest. So he books 4+ guests a week.
No. 3 to 4 guests a day.
I don't even get it. He's got like 1,000 guests that he has on every single year. So processes and procedures around guest booking, he's got it down. Next up, Renita Young, the queen of audio, I feel like. We've been hearing your voice for 15 plus years too, on radio, podcast. Renita, it's cool to share the stage with you for sure. Award-winning financial journalist and the host and senior market correspondent at Schwab Network. And like I said, queen of audio. Excited to hear your thoughts.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Dustin Heiner is next. Massive Passive Income, the host. You might have known him. Successfully unemployed. I love the shirt. He also has 2 million downloads or something. So not only massive in his title, but also massive show. And he also podcast guested on 150 shows in 2022. So he knows both sides of the coin from a guesting standpoint and from an interview standpoint. And then last but not least, my good friend Sarah Loesch here. She's a podcast producer and podcast guesting coach. So she helps a lot of people a lot of experts take their own podcast guesting journey. So it's going to be interesting to hear your perspective. Also the co-host of somewhat new podcast called Branded. So once again, you can find quick links, hit that QR code. Really excited about the panelists here. So how this is going to work out, I got about 25 minutes of questions that I'm going to ask this panel. But the real gold, I believe, is going to come from your questions in the audience. So we're going to leave about 15 to 20 minutes at the very end. So if you have a question, write it down, and I'll prompt those questions here near the end of the conversation. Chuck, I want to start the conversation off with you, though. I think a major evolution from most of us podcasters as we go from beginner to intermediate is not necessarily looking at our guest roster at who pitches us, but starting to think through who would be really good guest for our podcast. We start making that dream guest list. Anybody out there have a dream guest list? You write a bunch of names down, people you hope to interview. Yes.
Are we all on it?
I also have that dream guest list, and I don't know if it's just me or maybe it's you as well, but you look at that list and you start getting some imposter syndrome. You start thinking, why would this person ever want to come on my show? How would I get the attention of that person? So Chuck, I want to ask you, why is that the wrong mindset, and how, through the proper channels, can you actually book some of these dream guests?
Well, it's the wrong mindset because why would you aim low when you can shoot high and achieve your target? And I'm not going to speak ill of anybody who gets guests. Look, if you're doing your job and you're producing good content, more power to you. But the easy guest is not always the great guest. And I will use a FinCon example. She's not here. But everyone here who's ever had a debt show and talks about, I want to talk to somebody who knows about getting out of debt, will go find a whole bunch of people who are podcasters and bloggers and who have some experience. But a FinCon member, not here this year, is Jerry Detweiler. Jerry Detweiler wrote the Ultimate Credit Handbook, which before there was an internet was the single thing that everyone turned to go, how do you do this? So whoever you've got that you think, oh, they can help people get out of debt, Jerry has literally helped millions of people get out of debt. And she's accessible to you. If you said, hey, Jerry, I'm a FinCon member, done. She will find a way to do it. So whether it's the sources that are around you or the sources you don't think you have, they're there. And I'm going to prove the point in a way that I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a Luddite. I'm not technologically as savvy as everybody else. And I have something that's not friendly to the screen, but I do have a handout for those who want it today who are looking to book guests. So to prep for this, I basically said, let's make a quick list of what I would consider the 12 best, largest, big financial PR firms, the ones who are serving the biggest clients and who have big rosters. I then wrote all of them and I said, look, I'm going to FinCon. These are bloggers, podcasters, some new, some experienced. I want to know who would be in your organization ready to serve these folks, right? And I said, if you want to be included, if you want these folks to know about you, here's your assignment. It's a basic form. Here's your firm name. Here's who your clients are. Here's a couple of samples. And here's who somebody contacts. You have 36 hours, which, by the way, for me, I normally give about 36 minutes. You have 36 hours to be included. If you get to me after 36 hours, I will not include you. So the 4 who got to me after 36 hours are not included. The 2 that never responded are not included. But the 6, which included 3 who responded in the first hour, are here. They're in alphabetical order. You can use them all. I do have that handout for you. But I'll just point out, of the 6 who responded, 3 of them had somebody say to me, we increasingly have clients who want to be on alternative and niche media. They value content. You produce content. So you have a choice of aiming for what's easy and expedient or for aiming high. And most of you who do not work, say, my nutty schedule, have some ability to plan. And if you have ability to plan, you can go to a PR person and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Who in your client roster is there? How can they help me? And I need them in 3 weeks. Easy. So I will just encourage you always, go after the biggest, best sources. If you were here yesterday when Paula Pant was talking, she talked about what differentiates you from AI. It's that you can originate it. You have that thought. You want to continue to differentiate yourself. Take the access you have. And your access may not be my access, but your access is damn close to my access. And that's what you should know.
So if you want that pamphlet, go find Chuck after this panel, for sure.
Or send me an email. I'll happily send it to you if you don't want to carry paper home.
Sarah, let me pull you into this conversation here. So you help, on the flip side, you help podcasts, people that want to guest on podcast, put together successful email scripts to pitch host. Can you reverse engineer that for me a little bit and give me 1 or 2 tips for hosts to get the attention of some of these A-list guests?
First, you did such a great job of introducing us, but I don't think you even introduced yourself, so I will do that. This is Justin Peters. He is the host of the Struggle is Real podcast with Justin Peters, and he is the co-founder of Simple Pod Studios, and he is also fantastic, even though he doesn't know how to pronounce my last name.
Sorry.
Now, so repeat the question. I got distracted.
Pitching, especially on email, how do you get the attention of guests that you really want to land?
So if you're pitching a guest, especially a guest that is a bigger name, the first thing you really need to remember is that you're not likely talking to that person. You're talking to a gatekeeper. So how can you get the attention of the gatekeeper to the point that they want to actually pass along your information to the actual guest? So you want to be really thinking about the value that's in it for that person to come on your show. So whether that is a niche that you talk to, the audience that your show reaches, if it's the number of reach, whatever it is, or even if it's just the topic, but ideally it's something that drives a connection. So I've pitched things to guests or to hosts, and I've cited things from my personal background that I know we have in common. I've mentioned like, oh, I have a background in finance because I know they did too. Or something that says like, okay, we have something in common. I would enjoy talking to this person. Because the worst thing that you can do is try to go on a podcast or bring someone on your podcast that you have nothing in common with, you don't know anything about them, and you've never had a conversation. Because I don't know if y'all have ever been on a really awkward first date, but that is what that episode is going to feel like. So try to find the ways that you can really forge that connection so that you have something to go off of with that conversation. It feels very personal, it feels very natural and organic, and that's going to make them want to have that conversation with you.
Renita, podcasters, we have the responsibility to understand the background of our guest and make sure that they're credible. You, especially as a journalist too, probably even more of a responsibility for that. We don't want to book a guest and then in 3 months, they come on as an expert, and then 3 months we find out they're a fraud. So how do you go about making sure that the guests that you're pitching are actually credible?
That's a good question. And actually, we talked about that last year in a panel or a presentation that I did at FinCon. But there are a lot of different ways you can do that. Many times people choose to use public record searches depending on what you're trying to verify. There's a way to verify whether or not someone is, let's take millionaire status, for instance. You can ask questions like, are you an accredited investor? And that may reveal a little bit more. But other than that, kind of specific ways of searching Google that are better for you that some people don't necessarily know about. Full disclosure, you may already know about this, but when you're searching in Google for someone's name, just put quotation marks around their name. That way you don't, you get their name. You don't get the variations of the spellings of their name. This is something, obviously, people have known this for a long time, but it can weed out a lot, and some people don't really know that. But I ask around a lot as well. When I search for that person, if they happen to have been interviewed by friends of mine in the business, I ask how the interview go, and then obviously you look at local news on the person as well in their town. But public record searches are very powerful that you can use, and they're really accessible as well.
Let's transition into prepping for your interviews. Dustin, I want to bring you into this conversation now. 2022, you podcast guested on 150 plus shows, which is just incredible to me. Can you give me one or two examples of some really excellent things that hosts did that set you up for success in the interviews?
One of the biggest things that I saw was that the host was prepared and knew who I was. I've also been on shows where they had no clue who I was. And another small tidbit, if you're interviewing anybody, you need to be excited that the person's on. Like, okay, let's get to it. You don't want to act like this is just another thing that's going to be, let's get it out of the way, because the person that's going to be guesting is going to really get that sense of vibe. And what you want to do, when I'm actually going on other shows, I get the vibe from the other person. And if I get a sense that it's a little negative, I try as a guest to make it a little more positive. I try to steer it in the right direction, because I've been doing on it for a few different shows, like 150 shows. I can tell when it starts to go south. So I try my best to do this. But if you're interviewing, your best thing that you can do is know your guest, number one. Like, read up on them. Know who they are before you actually even start talking to them, and introduce them really well. Let me give you an example of what introducing somebody sounds like. You can say, well, here's Dustin Heiner, and he invests in real estate, and he has master passive. You can do that, and it doesn't make you look good or the person look good. And the person being interviewed doesn't feel confident about you. Or you can do it this way. Think of like the late night show hosts. late night show hosts, they do a fantastic job of interviewing people. Bringing them on first, though, is introducing them. That sets up the entire interview for success or failure. They don't say, well, here's Dustin Heiner and blah, 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 and list their accomplishments. First, what they do, they list all their accolades, all their accomplishments. So you're like, who is this person? This is so awesome. And then, and welcome to the show, Dustin Heiner. So much better. So if you want any cue, go and watch a late night show and see how they do it. That sets the entire interview off on such a great trajectory so that you can set up your guest to be a fantastic interviewee.
Renita, something you and I agreed on during our prep call was we really love deep research and, if possible, doing a prep call with our interviewee, our guest that's coming up here. But whenever I tell people that, sometimes I get the response, someone says, I don't do a lot of research because I want the conversation to feel organic and natural. Let's just assume that we have to play inside those boundaries. Mm-hmm. Is there a way that you can craft the interview so it doesn't necessarily feel like an interview, but it more so feels like a conversation?
I'm so glad you asked the question because the whole point of an interview is to make someone feel like they're not in an interview. You want this person to be so comfortable with you that they're able to talk to you like a friend. And that's why I think there's so much power in the pre-interview, because after you've done your research on this person and they know that you've essentially studied them and that you understand things about them that are not too surface, but you've actually done research, right? They will open up to you a little bit. I'm sure you've been on podcasts, or maybe you've experienced a podcast where that's happened before as well. I so value that, and if a person doesn't have time for a pre-interview, you can ask them to log on a little early for a sound check, perhaps, and then you ask things about them. One thing that I love that happens in pre-interviews is that sometimes people say things that you didn't research, and you might want to be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to ask you about that in the interview. So that's an area that, might spark something in them as well. But a pre-interview is where you get this person comfortable with you, you get comfortable with them, and it kind of takes out just that weird first date vibe. But I have another view of this as well. If it's a live interview that you're doing, you may want to think about whether or not you want to do that pre-interview or even see the person before you go on air. I'll give you an example. I once heard that Oprah Winfrey chooses not to do pre-interviews, chooses not to, maybe not do pre-interviews, but not to see the person in the studio before you do the actual interview. Like, do your research, of course, before and know who you're talking about. But this person, Oprah Winfrey, I hear, chooses not to see that person so that the authenticity of seeing each other for the first time on camera will be there. So definitely do the research, I say. But if it's a live show, consider, what you're doing. Much like on a late night talk show where the entrance is going to be recorded. That's the difference. If the entrance is going to be recorded, then think about how to go about that. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay.
Can I get a quick show of hands from the panel, in or out on pre-interviews? Do you have raise your hand if you're yes on pre-interviews?
Yes.
Dustin and Chuck are both out. Sarah's lukewarm. All right, Renita.
I do 1,000 interviews a year.
Chuck, I always got to bring you into
That would
this.
be 2,000 interviews a year.
If you can.
So, yeah,
Chuck,
no.
then how do you handle the research prep process? Is there any secrets on your side?
As I hope we'll get to, because I know Sarah's got a great point about being a guest, I'm very focused on what my questions are going to be. So I'm an old radio guy as well as a financial journalist. I'm used to keeping a radio clock. My show has multiple guests because we basically keep a radio clock. Clock is ticking. We're going straight into the questions as fast as we can get there. We're going to be talking about the market. I will have read whatever you've got in terms of did you have something that you put out recently, et cetera. I'll know what your positions are or what they were. We keep copious notes on, hey, you were on my show 6 months ago. 6 months ago you were saying this. Where are you now? Those sorts of things set us up. And look, to me, the other reason that I want to be there is I want myself to be present, and I also don't want to steal from a guest. A really good example here at FinCon, I did an interview this morning for my show. The guy and I had said we were going to talk yesterday, and I thought maybe, but we didn't know. We had a discussion. He had this great line, a line so good it was begging to be stolen as I set up the talk. But thank goodness I didn't, because I would have left him with nothing. So my job was to set something else up and not take the easy way out. And I'm sorry, but we all have an earworm, and that line, it was very tough in the live moment not to go down that earworm, because I heard him saying it, and I'm like, he explains what he's doing so well, I could just take that line and hope he's got the follow-up. But that's what we want to.
What's the line? You're killing me. What is it?
Yeah, come
I
on.
was talking about, so this was Benjamin Nadelstein from Metallic Money. I think I just got the name of Monetary Metals, and he was talking about how Warren Buffett basically says that, gold is a non-earning asset, and what his service does is turn gold into an earning asset. So he had a whole thing about Warren Buffett. I'll tell you what, if you want to hear it, hear the interview that we did today. It'll be on my show either Monday or Tuesday.
Shameless plug.
There we go.
Let's-
Can I add something to that?
Yep, go ahead.
So one thing that I've noticed, I have not done nearly as many guest spots as you, apparently, but I've had a lot of people ask to pre-interview me, and when we get to the pre-interview, we just start talking, have a conversation, and then they just ask about scheduling. And I'll say, well, you didn't ask me any questions. Wasn't this supposed to be pre-interview? They're like, oh, no, I knew I wanted you on the show. This was just to make sure we could have a conversation.
That's it.
So those ones are so great because we end up having this conversation for like 15, 20 minutes before I even realize that I'm not going to get interviewed. This is just a conversation. So by the time I get on their recording, I feel like I'm talking to a friend. Like I was saying before, you want to have that connection. So when I get to that interview, we dive right back into where we left off. We know a few extra nuggets about each other, and we can really feel comfortable and dive deeper because we already got past that like surface level. So for that reason, I do like those pre-interviews. I personally don't actually pre-interview for my show though.
Makes sense.
Let me add one thing. I love talking to other podcasters, and I love getting to know more people. Because when we network, that's why we come to FinCon, because we see so many awesome people and we can network and put them in our realm of influence and vice versa. And so what I love to do is I even block out an entire hour for and usually interviews are 30 minutes, but I block out the entire hour because if they want to stay on and talk later, let's talk even more because we've already had a great rapport through the entire interview. And lots of times we stick on for another 10, 15 minutes if they have the time and if I have the time, but I try to block an entire hour so that I can stay on later because I want to get to know them even more because they're good people. I love talking to podcasters.
And I don't go a full hour unless I have a reason to know that I'm going to need it, but I'm booking in half-hour increments because my interviews are not taking that time, and I very seldom am not filling a half hour. So again, I would say I don't do pre-interviews, but there's a reason that, by the way, as you're trying to build relationships with these people, and we talk back about getting a guest, one of the things that winds up happening with me is that it's very common for me to wind up pitching the guest and the PR person eventually. Why? Because I have a relationship with the guest and I'm letting the PR person know and we're going at both of them. I don't mind however they want to handle it, but they're going to potentially be my guest. And by the way, it's also good for the PR person. There are PR people who hate that, and I will point out it's a good reminder that when they're no longer your client, that you're the one who introduced us and got us the stuff as well. So it's part of it because, yes, there are plenty of people who, as much as we're a meat grinder to get it out, we're trying to have those relationships too.
Definitely. Sarah, question for you. You and I firmly agree on the fact that we absolutely hate an opening question that says, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
Don't do it.
I feel like intuitively as a podcaster, I understood that whenever I started podcasting that I needed to give credit to the guest and kind of give some context to why I was having the guest on. But I'm guessing there's probably a better way to open up the conversation than tell me about yourself or tell the listeners about yourself.
Absolutely, there is. I hate this whole thing. It is my pet peeve with podcasting. When you start your podcast with just tell us about yourself, you're doing a few things. You're making yourself look like you're not prepared. So like we had talked about before with being able to introduce your guest, that shows not only your audience, but the guests themselves that you've looked into them, you know who you're talking to, you know what they've done. When you just say introduce yourself, it's like, okay, I could have just pulled this person in off the street. I have no idea who I'm talking to. And then it puts all of the control of your episode into the hands of your guest.
Yeah.
So you don't
Take
get
advantage of that. When they do that, I take advantage of it and I keep talking. I just keep going. Okay,
It can be
you
good
asked.
for you as the guest, absolutely. But as the host, that host, he just took over his show. This just became the Dustin show.
Yeah.
And as the host, you don't want that. So they can take it in any direction that they want. I've listened to shows where they say, tell us about yourself, and 7 minutes in, that guest is still talking.
Yeah.
They've gone over their entire resume. It might as well have been a job interview.
Yeah.
And it's just, you've lost that control, and it can be really difficult to put it back on track. So as the host, what you want to do is do that introduction. Like everyone here on the panel has said, make the introduction yourself so you can go right into the conversation. And if you are the guest in that situation, have that answer prepared and do it in a way that is respectful for the host. Basically, answer it the way you want your guest to answer it. I generally say make 3 points: who you are, what it is that you do, and what you're here to talk about. So it should be no more than about a minute, if that, but it's just, I'm Sarah Losi, I am a podcast producer and coach, and I'm here to talk about how you could be a really great guest on a podcast. I just introduced myself. I gave you the reason why, hey, I'm an expert in this, so you should listen to me talk about this because I do this for a living. And if that's something that piques your interest, you're going to keep listening. But I didn't take over the show. It goes right back to the host, and they carry it the direction they wanted it to go.
I saw a couple head nods whenever we were talking about the rambling, the 7-minute tell me about yourself responses. By show of hands, is that something you've experienced before in the past? Yeah. We make that mistake a couple of times and then we're over it.
Only you can fix this problem.
Yes. All right, we're going to be shifting to questions here in 3 minutes. I'm going to jump into one more thread here, so if you have some questions, be thinking about them, write them down. I want to leave us with one more spicier thread, something that we disagreed on. There was a little bit of divide during our pre-call, which was really exciting. I was like, let's talk about this live on stage, and that is paying for guest spots. So, Dustin, one strategy for you for monetizing your show is charging for guests to come on the show itself. And once again, we had some divide on that decision, but as intermediate podcasters, we're always looking for creative ways to actually monetize our show. Many of you know we don't make tons and tons of money through podcasting. It's usually other things related to it, yes. So I think this is kind of a unique discussion to have here. Dustin, why did you decide to charge for guest spots, and what has it done for your show?
So on my podcast, it started with a solo show. I teach real estate, so I wanted to show that I knew what I was talking about so people can follow along me. And as we all know, if you have a podcast, you start getting pitches for people to come on your show. And so I got tired of just deleting them. And I was like, well, if they want to make it worth my while, I'm going to go ahead and offer them a certain dollar amount. If they want to take it, then they could take it. First, it was $750. It didn't take for a little while, but eventually that took. And I was like, okay, let me increase it up. $1,000, then $1,500. Now it's like $3,200. And just last week, I had somebody take me up on it. But here's the reason why I do this. Number one, if it's worth their time, they're going to pay for it. If I have the right audience, they're going to pay for it. If they're not, they're just going to move on. Imagine Facebook ads. I love Facebook ads, but at the same time, it feels like it's a black hole of money. If you do it right, you're going to make a lot of money. But what if you can get in front of a fantastic audience that's literally your exact audience? They want to hear you. They want to hear a long 30-minute episode about you, and then they look at you, that you're transferring that host, because they already bought in that host. Like if they come onto my show, they're paying me money to come on my show. My audience loves me. They want to listen to me. My trust that I've built in them, I've transferred it over to them. So for me, I use it as a way to help people to find the right people that want to connect. And so I personally do that because of many, many different reasons, but it's above all, it gets away people that, for me, like I really wanted to make sure I had the right people for my audience. If it's the right people, because I have a media deck. I literally reply, same email every single time, sends them a media deck. Who's my audience? And if it fits for them, and they're going to do really, really well with all my audience, and it's a certain dollar amount, and they have set, and they get it that perpetually. It's like Facebook ads, once they see it and it's gone, This is perpetual. Like, it's going to be an episode that's going to be there forever.
Chuck, I want to give you a moment to respond to rebuttal on that. I don't think you necessarily need to dismantle Dustin's argument. I think we all agreed. I think we all agreed that this is a legitimate strategy. But what are some concerns that we should potentially be thinking through?
Well, what I would say, and I wouldn't dismantle Dustin's argument, for those folks who want to have a pay-to-play model, have a pay-to-play model. Announce that you've got it as pay-to-play and go from there. And for the folks who are pay-to-play, who are willing to pay-to-play, understand that there are places that you are never going to get to. My show would be one of them. For starters, I'm a journalist in my day job. So if I'm taking money to give an interview, I would never pay for it to get an interview. I would never take money to give an interview. And if I did, I could basically kiss off any chance that I'd ever work for the Journal or Market Watch again. So that's another side of income for me that maybe doesn't affect you, and that's great. But the answer to me is one of credibility. With the guests that we have, I have the ability to tell somebody who comes on my show, and for those who want my one sheet, I have that here. I'll happily hand it to you. Our hard part of saying, which guests we've got. Well, let me explain a phrase that Dustin will not get to say, which is up next, Nobel Prize winning economist, fill in the blank. Because they're not going on a show where somebody's paying. And that's not a knock. Again, Dustin's model, Dustin is making way more money than I am, okay? Let's make this completely clear, okay? It's not, there's absolutely no way that my model is the financially successful model. And Dustin works to maintain his credibility as he can. But my credibility would be gone. And you have to question whether or not that's what happens. And I'll point out, by the way, since we were talking about it, I'll just say, this is a piece that was in Market Watch in September. The headline is, "Be a Real Estate Badass Podcaster Was Running an $11 million Ponzi Scheme." Now, to the best of my knowledge, this guy never actually came to FinCon, but there was a guy who was charged with being with the SEC, with being an unregistered agent of a Ponzi scheme. He was at FinCon in Washington. He was at FinCon the year before that I was aware of. And he and I have known each other for a long time. His agreement with the SEC was, I didn't do it, but I won't do it again. So he kept running his podcast, because his podcast wasn't about selling investments, right? I will tell you that for us, I can't have you be on his show and come on mine. I can't. It's the company you keep. And so that's the bigger concern for anybody, and I'm sure you've got the same concerns. Where, as journalists, it just can't happen. You can have sponsors, there's a lot of things that we can do. If somebody wants to be on my show, there are ways we can talk about doing it. But it's, the simple, hey, pay me this, come on my show. Nope, my credibility would be gone, my guests would never come back, etc.
It really goes against the ethics of journalism.
I'm on kind of both sides of this one because I don't do it and I've never done it, but I also see the value in doing it. And as someone with a marketing background that I spent most of my career in advertising and marketing, podcasts are not cheap to produce. We're putting our own money towards producing it, and we're giving our guests access to our audience. So technically, they are getting marketing. So I don't really think that there's anything wrong with them paying for that, as long as you have the stuff to back it up. If you're saying hey, pay me $500 to be on my podcast, I got 3 downloads this week, you're not going to be giving them the value that they're looking for. But if you're doing a high production value, putting a lot of work into this show, spending your time interviewing them, your time editing it, all of this stuff, you're giving them a product. So you can sell that product, but people don't have to buy it. If someone came up to me and said, hey, I'll give you $500 to let me on your podcast, okay, we'll record tomorrow. But I just haven't done it because I don't, my show launched about a month ago. I don't have that reach yet.
But would you disclose it when you have that guest on, so that the next time you have somebody on, somebody in your audience can say, okay, last week it was a paid guest and this week it's not?
Dustin, can you respond on that? And
Yeah,
how do you?
I say the sponsor of our show and X, Y, and Z, and tell them who they are.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's leave that thread there unless someone's really interested in a follow-up question on that. I do want to give the last 10 minutes to you guys. for your questions. So if you got a question, raise your hand. Please be succinct. I want to make sure we can get through as many questions as we can. Go ahead.
For the pre-interview, do you have like a special format that you run through for pre-interview, or is it just a conversation? What do you ask?
Well, some of it I test out questions that I might want to ask them, on the actual interview. Also this, who sends their questions to their guests ahead of time? Okay, so I don't do that. You don't want them to come too rehearsed. A pre-interview, you can help suss through some of that, but I typically don't like to send out full questions because I don't want them to be in my interview all robotic. I will give them themes in the email when we confirm the interview. Sorry, just wanted to put that in there because we didn't talk about it, but. Typically, I'll run through some of the themes, and it'll really mostly be based off of the research and how you want your interview to go, but more so what you want to get out of the interview. So, like, you have to figure out what you want to get out of this interview from this person, what you deem them as an expert of, and if you're trying to pull, tips to prepare for the home buying process out of them, then, you want to make sure you find out what they know about it that's unique in that pre-interview.
And I would add, if I can, that if they've sent you a pitch, I frequently say, did they read your pitch? If I've got a PR person, I'll say, if they read the pitch that you sent me and I'm asking them to be on the show, they're prepared. That's basically all you need to be able to do that.
Makes sense.
Can I?
White shirt right here.
Jerry St. Pierre, Life of Money Coach podcast question. From the moment I say I want a guest to the guest is in my studio, walk me through that step by step. I find a guest by looking online. I send them a seat. What does that look like? I want a guest. I now have the guest in my studio, step by step. Just boom, boom.
And I'm not sure if we're going to have enough time for the whole complete process, but do one of you guys
I'm
want to?
sure you guys can connect after.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a long thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's not the same for
Yeah.
every.
it's tough.
It's
Yeah.
not a linear.
talk to any
What's
of
their
us after.
what's their calendar? What's my calendar? That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No.
No, I think it's a great question.
It's a-
It's a great question.
Good question.
It is.
Very valid
It's
question.
It's a hard
time
question.
limit question.
Yes.
Just about connection, because like choosing your guests, like I see a lot of people and they have a million guests on their show, and I'm like, wow, it's strange. But I'm really very thoughtful about who I want on my show. I really want to know, okay, where do I want to land the show when it's done? Like, what do I want my audience to glean from it? And so the 3 questions, I tried at the beginning. I was like, yeah, I don't like to rehearse. So how from a connection standpoint and keeping up with the guests, do you continue to have people on the show, especially for you who have like a million?
Yeah,
How do you keep connecting?
Episodes.
There's a reason you want them on the show, right?
we have house rules about how often somebody can be back, which more often we're telling the PR people than we are to the guests themselves. We have rules about how often a firm can be back. It varies based on which interview they're doing in the show and a bunch of other things. But no, you're trying to be able to build it because it also builds credibility with your audience. I mean, my audience is very clear about who they like and who they don't like. It's the funny side is that I try very hard not to lie to a guest. So if I didn't like an interview, I will not say something like, hey, and let's do this again sometime or whatever as the music's playing when we're going out. And I'll do the other where I'll say, hey, this was great, whatever, let's do this again. And my audience will listen to that. And by the way, sometimes you just run out of time, so you can't say it. My audience will be like, you didn't invite him back? He was awesome. And then they'll do the other one and send me the one that goes, really? You'd have that guy back? That was horrible. So your audience will tell you a lot about that, but you'll get the vibe, and then it's about how often do you want them on and the rest.
And you were talking about maintaining a relationship. Like, you can do that through social media by retweeting them, by commenting on stuff that they do. I'd like to, I'm grateful that I was trained to be a journalist by old school journalists who had sources who would take them to dinner sometimes, if you have time for that, ever. And you feel like it's a valuable guest and you want to get to know them a little bit more, they're in town. It's all right to, do stuff IRL.
Yeah. The beauty of podcasting, I feel like, when you interview a guest, it's the start of a relationship, not the end of the relationship.
Yes.
Yes.
What if someone says, any tips for if someone says something that you disagree with on your podcast?
Yeah. Disagree.
Turn up the volume Buckle up, let's go.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
I'll take that. At least for my show, when somebody comes on and shares their opinion, just because I disagree, that doesn't mean it's wrong. And if I disagree, then we can push back. I can ask a question to clarify. I could maybe present a little point in a counter direction, but at the same time, just because you don't think it's right doesn't mean it's wrong.
And likewise, you don't also always have to share your opinion.
well, and in our case, we're bringing on diverse opinions. I always say it's not my opinion that matters, it's the guest's opinion that matters. But I'll give a quick about pre-questions and guest opinions. We actually turned down a Nobel Prize-winning economist. Ned Phelps is 90-plus years old. He did a new book. He won his Nobel Prize in 2003 for inflation work. You want to talk to this guy. Ned is nearly deaf at this point. And we can record in ways that would have done it. We actually agreed we would submit a list of questions to him, which we never do. In fact, I've never done it to anybody who's not a Nobel Prize winner in the 10 years plus years of the show. And we said the only caveat we have, we can't be bound to the list. And his folks would not agree, and we said no interview. And the reason for that was, what if he comes out and goes, Jerome Powell's a moron, and I can't respond?
Yeah.
So if you're agreeing, just getting back to that thing about pre-questions and whatever, you're the host. If you are tied to a script, then know that you are tied to a script, and you have given up your independence at that moment. We will not tie ourselves to a script. So it wasn't even about agreement or disagreement. It was about the potential for this conversation has to be, we would have been able to work it out. He could not. And by the way, when I told my audience this story, they were split. There were a bunch of people who said, you should have done it. He's a 90-year-old genius. And there were others who were like, you go. So.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Sarah?
I think the host of this one is in the room. What a client had a guest that we had to edit out an entire response because they realized that there was litigation involved and they wouldn't be able to share it. And I've had other times when they've asked to have things removed and I've said no. So it's kind of a case by case. If they're just like, I kind of regret saying this, but if you take it out, it kills the whole episode. Like, I'm sorry, you said it. I can add in the show notes like a disclaimer or something, but if I remove it, this whole episode is dead. Or there's something that is like, if this releases, I'm gonna lose my job. I'm like, it ain't that serious. It's just a podcast. I'll edit that out. So it's really case by case. Be respectful of them. This is their image as well, but there are sometimes that it's like nothing else is going to make sense. It's either we scrap the whole episode or you sound a little dumb.
That's a tough question. Yes, Mario.
Video podcasts. What are your thoughts on them? And if you add video, is it still a podcast?
So question was video podcasts. What are your thoughts on them? Anybody want to take that?
Okay, well, you were sort of looking at me. We don't do a video podcast, but we are about to start doing video probably in the next few weeks. We will never do our whole show on video because we just can't connect with the number of guests we have in a way that would allow us to do that. So the current plan is, can we make it that we would have one interview per day? I will simply tell you that for us, so I don't know how many of you handle editing, et cetera. We've always said we were live to tape, but we cut the crap. For those of you who do not know, CRAP is an acronym. It is crutches, repeats, accidents, and pregnant pauses. Write that down when you're getting ready to interview a guest. If you clean it up, you say we cut the crap. It's crutches, repeats, accidents, and pregnant pauses. You don't do that in video, because in video you do that, you turn the whole thing into a Godzilla movie where the mouths are moving and they're not on tape.
So let me add to that. So I absolutely use my podcast and put it in YouTube. But there's a big thing that I think you need to do. YouTube viewers are totally different than podcast listeners. If you do your entire show on podcast and you just put it on YouTube, like if you do your intro and because podcast listeners, I listen to podcasts. I love podcasts. So I listen to a lot of them. I love listening to the host talk before, and you get to know the host and lots of stuff before. So there's a good 5 minutes of talking. But on YouTube, back button in like 10 seconds and then you lost the algorithm. So what I do is I take the interview of the guest, I make the intro very, very short, introduce them, and this is the person, hey, tell me about, not tell me about yourself.
Tell me about yourself.
Tell me about how you got into this business here, whatever it might be. But I set them up, but it's direct because YouTube, they're going to hit the back button. Podcast is different. So what I do is I record the video first, strip out the audio, put the YouTube video up, and then I add an intro. I add the music, I add everything else before it, and then I put the content in after that. And it goes, I think, pretty well.
If I can add to that, always make sure if it is a podcast, you are recording for audio first. So if you say something that someone listening wouldn't understand, make sure you explain it. Like, I really love your hat. He's wearing a hat that says this, like, so that you don't alienate your listeners. But video is really great right now for reach, but audio is great for growth. So the video is going to be great for TikTok and Reels and Shorts and stuff like that, but you don't get the same level of connection. There's a connection that comes from podcasts because when they're just in your ears, you feel like you're part of the conversation. If you're looking at a screen of two people talking to each other, you're an outsider. So if it is going to be a podcast, the audio first method is going to be really, really important, but the video is still going to be great for cutting up and sharing on social media so that you can reach more audience. Completely agree. People are very specific with how they consume content. You're not going to change someone from being a non-podcast listener to a podcast listener, so the video can help you reach another audience, but consider them separate. Make sure you're not alienating either way.
Jordan, we got 1 more minute for another question. Cool. In the back. Yeah, you're persistent. I love it. Does anybody use a standardized waiver?
I use a general release form. I actually use that when someone's going to be on my podcast. My podcast goes out on a Podpage website because it's co-branded with 2 different companies, mine and my partners, and they have a standard release form built in for you. I would probably go that direction and have something that is at least standard so that you have permission to release that content and they've given you that permission, so that they can't just come back with like, oh, well, you didn't tell me it was being recorded, because that will happen.
I appreciate everybody for coming out today. That's a wrap, but I'm sure our panelists will hang around here up on stage, so feel free to come up, say hi, ask your follow-up questions, and as soon as we get booted, we'll just hop out into the room. Thanks again, everybody. I appreciate it.